Hey, my name is Thomas and today let's talk about Fuji. I want to give you an overview over the Fuji X mount system and maybe even sort of a mini buyer's guide. I realized that the Fuji X camera system can be a bit confusing for people because there are so many different bodies out there, but in reality it's very simple to understand, and it's more like it's like a matrix actually, a Fuji matrix if you want so, and that is what I'm going to do today. So before we start, just a few informations about this video. As usual, I'm not connected to Fuji in any way. I just do this in my spare time because I'm a huge camera lover. I also love all the other camera brands, but I'm currently using a Fuji myself, and I got some inquiries from you viewers about that camera, and if I can talk a little bit about it. It's the X-E3. Now Fuji is announcing the new X-E4 in a week or so, so maybe let's wait with that video until we know more about the new X-E4, and then I can just do an X-E video for you guys. And the second thing is there's a lot to talk about Fuji, so this video will have several sections. I put the timestamps in the timeline below, so you can jump to whatever section you want to watch. First, I'm going to cover the three sensor generations, the three Fuji X trans sensor generations. Those are very important to understand because they sort of define the image quality as well as the performance of your camera. So within one generation, the performance of all the different bodies will be roughly the same, and the image quality of course is virtually identical. Then I'm going to cover the 6 different body styles that Fuji has made so far, and then you will really see like a matrix with 3 columns and 6 rows, and then it all of a sudden makes huge sense what Fuji does. The system started in 2010, so of course they have several generations, but even the older cameras can be a great buy when you shop used. So in the last section of the video I will pick a few that I think are sort of standout camera models that I personally like a lot and that I would recommend to you. So there will be different recommendations depending on what sort of photographer you are, how big is your budget, all that. I will pick I think 5 different bodies. Nonetheless, basically every body is a good buy when you get it for the right price, so it's just my personal Tom's picks, so to say. As always, if you have any questions or comments, there is a comment section below. I love it when you write comments and give me feedback, or you have questions, just write it down. I will answer everything. And also I want to say a big thank you for all the subscriptions I already got. This is such a cool thing. I really enjoy giving back something to the community. You know, I was sitting behind the screen like you do and consuming a lot of information over years, and I learned so much about photography and camera gear and whatnot else, and connected to folks just by watching and consuming this stuff. So now it feels very good to sort of give back something to the community, and I love that you already subscribed, and many thanks for the support. So let's start with the sensor generations. There were 3 of them, 16 megapixel, 24 megapixel and 26 megapixel. It's important to realize that the sensor in your camera absolutely determines the performance. So not only the image quality, but also autofocus performance, low light performance, continuous autofocus, and to a great extent even the video capabilities. The first generation is with a 16 megapixel sensor. The image quality is still very good. It's just a little bit less resolution, but apart from that, if you zoom into 100%, basically the photos of all these cameras of the different sensor generations, they all look the same. It's just a difference in resolution. I personally find 16 megapixels a bit limiting by now. However, that photo I took several years ago with a 18 megapixel Canon DSLR, and the print, which is 24 by 36 inch, still looks amazing. That's not the problem, but keep in mind today we have 4K screens, 5K screens, 8K TV screens, stuff like that. Even 24 megapixel is not really overkill anymore. So normally I would recommend you to go to the 24 or 26 megapixel sensors. Apart from that, also the first generation is really inferior when it comes to low light performance. I don't mean the image quality, but I mean like how the autofocus works, or if you are like shooting on a tripod, you're doing night shots, you know, those things, 30 seconds, 1 minute exposures. The viewfinder image or the view on the screen is super noisy. It's even hard to compose the shot if you're using one of the old cameras. For that reason, again, I would recommend you to go to the 24 megapixel generation at least. If you are really interested in action shooting, sports, you know, stuff like subject tracking, face detection, all that matters to you a lot, then go for the last generation. The 26 megapixel bodies, they're really state of the art in these things. If you don't need that, if you are more, you know, a landscape shooter, travel shooter, someone like me, not very sports or action oriented, then the second generation bodies are also great for you. Did I forget anything? Oh, one thing I want to point out is there can be some differences in the feature set within one sensor generation. For example, the first 24 megapixel body, that was the X Pro 2. And that one doesn't have 4K video, but all the subsequent 24 megapixel bodies do offer 4K video. So there's a difference which is quite big if you want to shoot video, even though otherwise the performance of the X Pro 2 is basically the same to all the others with a 24 megapixel sensor. So keep in mind there can be some differences in the feature set, in the firmware within one sensor generation. And now let's talk about the different body styles. There are basically 6 different body lines in the Fuji lineup, and I'm just gonna go through them from top to bottom, so to say. Well, more or less. If you want the you know, one thing does it all body, the top line with the biggest viewfinder view, the most professionally made bodies with weather sealing, and also the full Fuji user interface with all the dials, the marked dials, and even a marked ISO dial, then you have to go to the XT single digit series, XT1, 2, 3 or 4. The newest one, the X-T4, even adds IBIS, in-body stabilization, so it's the complete feature set that you can get when you're shopping for a Fuji body. They got a little bit bigger and heavier over the years, so the X-T4 now stands at around 600 grams, which is a lot for an APC camera, but again, it packs it all in one body, and it's like the top model. Then we've got the X-H series. That's a bit a weird one because there's only one single camera that has been introduced a couple of years ago. It had the 24 megapixel sensor, and it was very quickly superseded by the X-T3, which already had the 3rd generation sensor. So yeah, the market placement was a bit weird. It was marketed as the absolute top model back then. It's even more beefy, even bigger, even more heavy than the X-T4, but it's an older body. Then we've got the X-S series, and that's a brand new release. The X-S10 is the first one. It came out in mid-2020. It was designed as a sort of price-performance ratio best camera. It's got all the electronics, all the functionality of the X-T4, including the IBIS, but it's in a much smaller, a little bit simpler made body. No weather sealing, much more lightweight. It's below 500 grams, which is maybe nice. and it does not have the traditional Fuji user interface. Instead, it's got a standard interface with, you know, the unmarked command dials and the program mode dial on top of it, like your average Canon, Nikon or Sony, maybe designed to appeal to a different user group. Then next level down is the X-T double-digit series, that's X-T10, 20, 30. They have a reduced sort of body, they have less buttons and dials, so it's all a little bit simpler made. Still, the performance is basically the same, as I said, compared to the others, but the feature set and the functionality is a little bit reduced. Sort of the entry level to the X-Trans lineup, really. And now there is a big bar in my matrix, because now I'm covering the X Pro and the X-E series, and those appeal to completely different style of photographer, really. The X Pro was the very first camera. That was how Fuji started the system, and when it came out it looked more like a sort of a rangefinder look-alike. It even has an optical viewfinder that you can switch between optical and electronic, which is completely unique on the whole market. It also has the traditional user interface, of course. It looks a bit like a 1970s camera with a screen on it. It does not have the separate ISO dial, because where the dial would be on the X-T1, 2, 3, 4, this camera has the viewfinder, so it just doesn't fit there. So they integrate the ISO functionality in the shutter dial. Very analog feeling camera. Again, very unique because of the optical viewfinder feature, and also pretty expensive, because they are also like top of the line, even though they don't have the, they are not designed to do it all like a professional tool. They are more designed to be a traveler, connoisseur sort of camera, let's put it that way. Also a very upmarket one. The last lineup is the X-E series, and basically the X-E series does the same as the X Pro, but it omits the optical viewfinder, so that makes those cameras cheaper and also much smaller than the X Pro. They are more, but they still appeal to the same sort of analog crowd. People who value the analog dials and the classic rangefinder look of cameras. They're very elegant cameras, but much smaller and also much cheaper than the X Pro series. So yeah, there you have it, 6 completely different body styles, but now when you think about it, they all make sense, and you see it's like a matrix. It's easy to pick the right body, basically. Once you got behind how the Fuji X system works, it's not that confusing anymore. So now let's proceed to Tom's picks, my picks. What are the cameras I would recommend the most? As I said already, take it with a grain of salt, just as a recommendation or an inspiration. If you pick any of the other bodies of the system, I'm sure you will know why, and they are all good buys, if you get them at the right price, that is. I'm gonna both pick new cameras, but also some that you only can get used on the used market. Personally, I buy all my cameras used because I have a lot of classic analog cameras, and always made, I never had a bad experience, maybe once in 10 years. So I always recommend to have a look at the used market in your area and find someone nice who is selling an old camera. Often you get them and they look like new, because many photographers, they don't really use their cameras a lot. So okay, having said that, if you want it all, if cost is no real object to you, you just want the best user experience and also the most versatile camera, I would recommend the X-T4. It's very pricey, but it packs it all. It's got the newest sensor generation, it's got a beautifully made body with all the dials, it's got a big viewfinder view, also good for people wearing glasses, and it's got IBIS, which I find is a killer feature, and it's sort of sad that Fuji doesn't have a lot of IBIS options so far. Pick the X-T4 if you've got the cash, Be aware it's not like a price performance winner, because you can get a Nikon Z6 or Z5 for less money and then you've got a nice full frame camera. So be aware there are nice options in other camera systems as well, just saying that. But they don't have the Fuji user interface, and maybe, yeah, the X-T4 is a really sort of luxurious camera. So my recommendation does it all. If you are on a budget, however, but you still are looking for a very well-performing, modern, state-of-the-art camera, then have a look at the X-S10, because it does exactly the same as the X-T4. Same performance, same autofocus, also IBIS, same image quality, everything perfect. And it's like half the price, and it's also much more lightweight. It's I think 480 grams or something, including the battery, and the X-T4 is 600. However, the X-S10 does not have the Fuji user interface. Now that's a long topic in itself. Maybe I have to do another video about the Fuji user interface at some point. It's not better or worse, it's just a matter of taste. So for guys who love these traditional dials of the other Fuji bodies, the X-S10 is the wrong body. If you're coming from another system and you just want a camera to work like a Sony or a Nikon, then the X-S10 is perfect for you. Anyway, it's got the best price-performance ratio of the new bodies, in my opinion. Now, let's say you are a bit more on a budget, on a tighter budget, but you really want a nice, hefty body that is reliable, weather-sealed. You also value big viewfinder view, nice handling, but you're not that action and sports oriented. My suggestion is actually the X-T2. You can pick those up for like 450 euros. Of course, it depends on where you live in the world, but they are pretty cheap by now because they have the older generation sensors in them. And again, if you're just shooting normally with a single autofocus, they are super snappy. They can track, they can do face detection. It's just not as perfect as in the modern bodies. If you don't need that stuff so much, get an X-T2. You will also love the big viewfinder view. There has been some talk that in certain situations, backlit situations, there can be weird sensor reflections when you take a photo and the sun shines, you know, through something onto your sensor. Personally, I never had that issue, but I wasn't using an X-T2 very long. But maybe if you're worried about that sort of stuff, have a look if that matters to you. It was a sort of a shitstorm when the camera came out, but many photographers use the X-T2. They don't have that issue, but I'm just saying, you know. Then let's say you are like a connoisseur, you like a good wine, you like an old S-Class more than a new C-Class or E-Class, even though the S-Class can't go that fast and is dated. In camera land, you are attracted to cameras like the Contax AX or maybe Nikon F4 or stuff like that. So you like hefty, beautifully made, super rugged, luxurious camera bodies that really feel like a big, hefty tool in your hand, very grippy, and just made with a little bit of extra in terms of manufacturing quality and stuff like that. If you're that sort of person, my recommendation would be to have a look at the X-H1. So that maybe this sounds not to you like I'm selling it to myself, and I'm actually thinking sometimes I should get one. It's super heavy, 670 grams. For an APS-C camera is insanely heavy, but it's so well made. It also has these quirky features like the OLED display on top that, yeah, I'm not sure if anyone really needs that thing, but it just looks so cool. And it's on the old sensor generation, not for your action guys. It doesn't perform better than an X-T2, but it adds IBIS. That makes it also very interesting because it's by far the cheapest option right now to get a Fuji with IBIS. So it gets a recommendation from me. If you like it, you will know that is maybe the camera for you just by looking at it. Now we come to the traveler, lightweight, budget recommendation. Two interesting bodies to pick from. I would say if you value style and classic user interface, you have to go to the X-E series, so it's either the X-E3 or the new X-E4. The price difference is of course high. If you buy the X-E3 used, you can pick it up for like 350 euros by now, and the X-E4 is like twice the money. So of course the X-E3 gets a recommendation from me because I don't value the difference between the second and third sensor generation that highly. I don't think these cameras are made for action style photography. You want to have another body with a, you know, bigger hand grip and big zoom lenses if you're really into action, in my opinion. The X-E series is more the traveler, lightweight camera sort, yeah. So the X-E3 I also recommend because the X-E4 still does not have IBIS, which would have been a real addition. However, the X-E4 adds a tilt screen, so if you like that feature and you miss it on the X-E3, have a look at the new X-E4. Also be aware that because of their compactness, the viewfinders of the E-series are really inferior to those of the T-series, especially the X-T1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're wearing glasses, I wouldn't recommend an X-E series unless you're aware of the issue or you also like to shoot a lot on the rear screen. You don't really need the viewfinder all the time. Be aware the X-E series viewfinder is small and the view is just not as nice as with the other bodies. Nonetheless, it gets my recommendation, and I personally love the X-E3 because it's so beautiful, so simple, so lightweight, and it is pretty snappy and fast actually in everyday use. Beautiful little camera. Okay, that was my overview over the Fuji system. I hope you found it helpful in some way or informative. If you have any questions, just write in the comment section below. I will answer everything that you write. And apart from that, yeah, thanks for watching. I've got some other videos coming up. I told you I want to do an X-E3, X-E4 sort of video once the X-E4 is available. And also I'm going to do the review of the TT Artisan 50 f1.2 for APS-C, brilliant manual focus lens. Unfortunately my order hasn't arrived yet, so that's a little bit delayed. A long way from China to Europe, I understand that. And last not least, I'm also working on some non-Fuji content, yeah, with another camera review. So yeah, stay tuned, stay healthy, have fun going out and taking photos, and thanks and bye bye.